Thank you very much for joining me tonight on this talk on anxiety. I would like to introduce myself for those who don't know me. My name is Nadine Bitar. I'm a CBT REBT psychotherapist, and I'm speaking to you from Lebanon. Thank you, Rita, for this great endeavor that you're, this effort that you've made, and thank you everyone for joining us, joining the Beirut on this charity event. Okay, so our talk for today is on anxiety and how to overcome it. I'm thinking to leave a few minutes at the end for your questions and the answers so that we can have a more fluid talk. Right, so what is anxiety? Let's start by defining anxiety. Anxiety is the feeling of dread, worry, and fear when faced with a potentially dangerous or threatening situation. Now, we have three types of symptoms when it comes to anxiety. We have our thought symptoms, our behavior symptoms, and our feelings. With regards to our thoughts, when we're feeling anxious, we look to the future and predict the worst. We underestimate our ability to cope with the threat, and we tend to magnify the threat. Also, we tend to demand for perfection. We demand for approval. We demand for, we are seeking certainty and reassurance. With regards to our feeling symptoms, when we're feeling anxious, we have accelerated heart rate, raised blood pressure. We have this feeling of being so unreality. We have gastrointestinal upset. We have blurred vision. We have sweaty palms. We have muscle tension and spasms. We feel dizzy and lose concentration. With regards to our behavior, is usually when we're feeling anxious, it's that of avoidance. So we either withdraw physically or mentally or both. We avoid facing the situation, we procrastinate, we try to do things perfectly, or alternatively, we overcompensate, we overdo things, overcheck, overprepare. So it's not very helpful to feel anxious, really. It doesn't help us when we're faced with a potential threat. What are the causes of anxiety? Well, I can name three obvious ones. Here, there's the genetic cause, which is if you are born in a family with anxious parents. So we're talking about the biological aspect of anxiety. There is another cause for anxiety, a very important one, which is related to the parenting style. So if you're brought up in a family whereby your parents are either overprotective, so they could be overprotective, meaning that they will not allow you to feel any frustration. They'll try to fix all the problems for you around you. They won't let you struggle. They try to make things easier for you. And that actually is not very helpful, because then you won't learn to tolerate difficulties and tolerate anxiety if you're faced with a situation, because if you're feeling anxious, then you will try to find solutions, but if solutions are always there for you, then it's not going to help you. Another defeating parenting style is when the parents are controlling. And controlling parents will try to micromanage everything for you. They will comment on all your behavior. They'll try to change all your behavior, and they will interfere with your life choices, such as friends and outside influences. So this type of control is not very helpful, because it discourages independence and feeds dependency and anxiety. And finally, inconsistency on the part of the parents is not very helpful either, and it will cause anxiety to children, because inconsistency means that the child doesn't know anymore if the parents are going to snap, they're going to get angry, when they will get angry, how they will react. And so the child remains on their toes and feel that they have no control over what happens to them in life. Right. So now, how to overcome anxiety. So obviously, it's difficult to control anxiety because it's difficult to control our emotions. I mean, symptoms or emotions, when they come, they come. So with regards to symptoms, so if you're feeling sweaty or you're having heart palpitations because you're anxious, or if you're feeling ashamed and you're starting to blush, you just, it happens. And even if you didn't want to feel all that, you will, right? But, I did say that I was an REBT therapist, and REBT, so yeah, I've gone dark because of the electricity cut. REBT advocates that we are responsible for how we feel and how we react. I'm not sure how you think, what you think of that, but I, for one, really think it's very powerful, because if you have control over your emotions, so if you're responsible for your anxiety and for your anger, for your shame or hurt, it means that you can do something about it to get rid of it, right? So how does that happen? How can we be responsible for our emotions? So since our emotions and thought and symptoms are not really within our control in the moment, what comes next is our thoughts. So REBT will say that our thoughts are responsible for all our emotions within a specific situation. Albert Ellis, who created REBT, so the genius, differentiates between healthy and unhealthy emotions. But let's focus here on the negative emotions, because you don't go into therapy for positive emotions. When you're faced with a negative situation, as a human being, so as a normal human being who doesn't have any chemical imbalances in the brain, you will have a negative reaction, a negative response when faced with a negative event or a scary, so threatening event. But here, Ellis differentiates between healthy and unhealthy negative emotions. So with regards to anxiety, he differentiates between healthy anxiety and the, unhealthy anxiety and the healthier counterpart, concern. Why does he call them healthy and unhealthy? Well, simply because when you're feeling an unhealthy emotion, you get stuck. And when you're stuck emotionally, then you don't know how to deal with your situation, and you don't know how to find solutions. And in fact, you sabotage your goals and you self-defeat. So as we've seen with anxiety, if you, let's say you're faced with giving a presentation at work and you're feeling anxious, then we've seen that you're going to have racing thoughts, you're going to have irrelevant thoughts, your behavior is going to be that of avoidance, or you're going to overdo things. You're not going to be prepared for your presentation. But on the other hand, if you're feeling concerned, which is the healthier anxiety, I don't like the word anxiety when it comes to concern, but still, when you're feeling concerned, then you believe that you're up to facing that threat. You will find solutions, you will do something about it, you're more in control. So again, in the case of a presentation, if you're feeling healthily concerned, you're going to prepare well for it. You're not going to have the type of emotion that will get you stuck. In fact, you'll be having the type of emotion that's going to motivate you to reach your goal and to find constructive solutions. Right, so how can you change anxiety to concern? So we said by thinking, by changing your thoughts. What kind of thoughts will result in a healthy concern, simply rational thinking. What does rational thinking mean? It means to be realistic, logical, and pragmatic about your situation. For you to do that, then you're going to have to accept your reality. So what does acceptance mean here in the context? So if you're faced with a scary situation, you have to accept it. So if we're talking about Beirut, for example, a lot of people are really worried about, what the future is bringing, and about the political unrest, the economic, downhill of the state of our economy. And a lot of people are really worried about that situation. And if I come and say, you've got to accept it, I don't mean surrender to it. What I mean by accepting, and what REBT means by accepting, is that you acknowledge the reality, you admit the reality, that indeed it is a bad situation, and that we're going downhill with regards to the economic situation. Politically, there's unrest. We don't know what the near future brings, let alone the far future. And it's not looking really good. So accepting means, first of all, acknowledge the reality for what it is. Second, it means acknowledge that all factors are in place for this reality to be. So of course, the factors in this case are, we still have the same politicians, the system is still the same, we are, the dollar is, the Lebanese pound is extremely high now to the dollar, there is unrest. So all these factors contribute for this towards this negative reality. And then finally, acknowledge that you don't like it, that it's negative for you, and that you want to do something about it. So the next step for you would be to either find some constructive solution for your situation. And if you can't, then you instead look for a way to adapt to that situation. And that's when you're accepting the reality. But if you were not to accept the reality, then in other words, you'd be saying, oh, you know what? I don't like it. I don't like this reality, and this reality doesn't suit me. It mustn't happen. Let me just chuck it out and replace it with one that suits me best, which says this mustn't be the case. And when you're thinking this way, really, you're being very rigid about your desires, and you're not being realistic, logical, or pragmatic, because you're not facing the reality as it is. And if you're not facing it, then how can you deal with it? So going back to someone who's giving a presentation at work, if you're being flexible about the result of your presentation, so let's say, so you're faced with that presentation, and it's important for you to do well and not to fail, and your desire is not to be judged negatively, and to really succeed. So if you're flexible about it, you're going to be more relaxed, because you're going to accept that, you could fail and you could be judged negatively, and that is not really the end of the world. You can cope, because you know what, you're only human, in other words. Then you would go relaxed, and you would say what you would focus on what you have to say. But when you're rigid about, let's say, failure, or about being judged negatively, then you're going to be focusing mostly on what people are thinking of you, how they're looking at you. You're going to focus on your symptoms, on your anxiety, and you're not going to really come out with what you should be focusing on, which is the content of your presentation. And then you're more likely to fail, and therefore sabotage your goal of succeeding, and more likely to be judged negatively. So REBT will say that when you're being rigid about your desires, what you're doing is that you're demanding a different reality, which is not within your control. And so we say that you're holding a must belief, a rigid must belief. And when that demand does not get met for you, then you go on to catastrophizing the reality and the outcome of the reality. And you say, oh my God, this is like the worst thing ever for me. But then you don't stop there. You go on to saying, oh, I can't cope. I can't be up to facing this situation. And then finally, you start putting yourself down or others down. And we say that you're downing, you're holding a either self-downing, other downing, or life downing belief, which says that life is horrible and unfair. And when you're thinking this way, actually, you get emotionally disturbed before facing the anxiety-provoking situation. And then when things don't happen your way, you will be disturbed after that situation takes place. Right, so what happens to the brain when we're anxious and we're mistranslating situations and exaggerating the badness of them? I've got a little diagram here for you. I'm going to, it's hand drawn, so it's all right. I'll just go through it with you. You can stop me. You can just say, you can interfere and say, to show you or to explain more if you want at this stage. So, right, let's start with this. This is called the ABC model. And at A, so this way, let's put the event here, the situation. And the situation here, or event, is you giving a presentation at work, right? And of course, you giving that presentation at work entails the possibility of you failing and therefore being judged negatively by those who are listening to you, by others. Now, if you don't accept this reality by demanding a different one and saying at B, which is where your perception and your thoughts are, if here you're demanding that this absolutely shouldn't happen, and that if it did happen, it would be 100% bad, would be end of the world, and that you couldn't bear it, what would happen is that you're going to get anxious. Sorry, you're going to get anxious as a result of that perception. And when you get anxious, your brain, which job is to protect you, really, is going to throw off an alarm and say, think it's you're faced with a too dangerous situation. So the brain, actually, if we're talking about, the brain protecting you, it does not question what you think. The brain doesn't question what you say, and it doesn't question what you hear. It takes it as a matter of fact, as it being true. So if you were to, if I were to tell you, you know what, I'm speaking to you now, but in fact, I'm climbing the Kilimanjaro right now. I bet you guys are going to visualize me on top of a mountain, or probably just a mountain. Or if I were to say, you know what, there are, I don't know, 3 blue whales just sitting opposite me here. I mean, it's not true, but you probably visualize whales. I mean, you see in front of you whales, blue whales. And that's because although in your mind, in your perception, in your translation, you know that it's not true, but the brain will not question what I'm saying. So what you say, what you hear, and what you think will be translated by your brain as a matter of fact, as a form of, in a visual, which will then translate in an emotion. So if I were to tell you it's really cold up here where I am, you probably feel a little bit the cold, and you would, imagine something like of a cold atmosphere around me, yeah? So same here. If you're going to think that you failing at a presentation is awful, and you can't bear it, and that's too dangerous, you're going to feel anxious, and then the brain is going to pick up on that too dangerous, and it's going to throw the alarm of danger in your body and release your sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight or flight response. And that fight or flight response is going to release all these hormones in your body so that you can protect yourself. So either run, hide, or fight, or freeze. So, of course, you know, the brain doesn't differentiate between giving a presentation and a tiger in front of you. So, of course, the brain thinks there's a tiger, you're faced with a tiger. So if you need to flee, it's releasing all the adrenaline and noradrenaline into your body. And the oxygen is just leaving your brain and going down into your big muscles because you need to fight that danger off, or, you know, avoid it, run. And in fact, you're going to have all these symptoms that we mentioned. You're going to feel a little dizzy because there's not much oxygen in your brain anymore. Your stomach is going to start churning. You're going to have an upset digestive system because it's not working anymore. That's not useful anymore. Your memory is not useful at the moment when you need to run and hide from the tiger. You need to be very light, so you might feel like you need to rush to the bathroom. So you need to feel really light so you can run and hide. You're going to so that's when you're fleeing. When you're fighting in the setting of a presentation, you're going to overthink and overdo things, and you're going to over-prepare. You'll probably remember the first paragraph of your presentation and know it by heart with every comma and every full stop, and then you're going to forget everything else, and you're not even going to prepare for the rest. So that's not useful at all. If you are here in need of everything, of all your capacities to cope with your situation, with your presentation, well, by doing this, you're making sure to defeat your goal, sabotage your goal, because your brain is going to help you flee from that instead of facing it. And that's because you're being rigid about what you want in this situation. On the other hand, when you're being flexible about failure in this situation, right? So if you're, again, faced with the same thing here, you're faced with giving a presentation and possible failure and negative judgment, and you're telling yourself that, yes, it could happen, but you know what? I wish it didn't, but it could happen. You're also telling yourself that, yeah, there's worse in life than failing at a presentation and being judged negatively. I mean, my life could be, you know, if I got ill, or my loved ones, you know, were in an accident or something really bad, then that would be worse than me failing at a presentation. And then, you know, if you're telling yourself that, yeah, it will be difficult for me to tolerate such a situation, but I can cope, then again, here, the brain is going to pick up on the fact that you need help, but that you're up to that, up to facing that situation, and it's going to release the necessary hormones for you to cope and be able to think clearly about how you can solve this problem. And as a result, it will release for you your parasympathetic nervous system, which is going to be responsible for you feeling, being in the normal state, physically, and in a kind of a neutral state, and that you're going to feel well enough for you to think constructively about how to give that presentation in a way so as not to fail and not to be judged negatively. So again, having that healthy emotion of concern is going to be very helpful for you and motivating. Right. So the key to overcoming your anxiety basically is to change your thinking about the event, the anxiety-provoking event, or about the situation that you find yourself in, which is anxiety-provoking. And to be able to change your thinking, what you need to do is challenge it. So first of all, make sure to keep a reality check. Ask yourself if you really need to succeed or not, for example, in this situation. What we really need are our basic needs are oxygen, food, shelter, and love. These are our basic needs. Anything beyond that is not a need for us. It can only be a preference. I mean, that's for our survival, but we can go even further, because who says that we absolutely have to survive? I mean, we could die, but for you really to warrant anxiety, and okay, fine, if you get to that point, it could be useful to be anxious, because evolutionary wise, anxiety does have a purpose. I mean, at the time when we were primitive and living, surrounded by predators, of course, being anxious was helpful, because we needed to protect ourselves for the sake of the survival of the species. But with time, our brains developed, and we developed the frontal lobe, which is responsible for our rationalization, and we were able to rationalize situations and see if really there was need for anxiety or not, for need for this over exaggeration of the badness and danger of the situation. So today, living in an urban society, there's little need for anxiety. What we really had better do is actually, we had better have an emotion which is going to help us cope with a scary situation, an emotion that's going to help us, find constructive solutions. And so when you're challenging your thoughts, you need to really ask yourself these three questions. First of all, is it true or realistic for me to be rigid, to be demanding something that I'm not in control of? And if your answer is no to that, then you had better adopt a more flexible approach and acknowledge that you may not be able to get what you desire, and acknowledge that the universe is not going to just create a new law for you and move things around just because you want something. The second question to ask yourself is it logical for me to want X just because, to demand for X just because I want it? No, it doesn't make sense really, because it's not logical. And just because you want something, it means you have to have it. And then finally, when you're challenging yourself, your thoughts, ask yourself, is it useful for me to be thinking in that way, in that rigid way? How do I feel when I'm rigid about something that I can't control? Does it help me? Or what kind of emotion I get? And if your answer is negative, it's no, it's not helpful, it doesn't really give me a kind of anxiety that really I don't need at this moment. In fact, I need to be more in control of my emotions. Then you had better change these beliefs and these, oh, are you there? Can you still hear me? Am I still here?
Yeah, you're good.
Because it says that I've left. Oh, sorry.
You left, your laptop left.
Oh, my laptop left, yes. But my laptop left ages ago, but yeah, right. So ask yourself these three questions. And if your answers are no to those questions, then become more flexible about reality and acknowledge that you're not in control, but what can you do to make the best of it? Right, so we left with, I'm going to use probably another 5 minutes more and then leave you to ask questions. So the common beliefs that we'd be having around rigid demands are, so yeah, as I said, I mustn't fail, I mustn't be judged negatively. We could be rigid about something going wrong and demand that it mustn't go wrong, that it, I mustn't be disappointed, or I mustn't be disapproved of, I must be perfect, I must do things perfectly, I must be loved by everyone, life must be fair, everything has to happen my way. So these are so anytime that we feel we're rigid about situations that we're not in control of, about our desires, then we say that we are holding a must belief, a demand, a rigid demand. And so when we become aware of that, would be useful for you to start challenging, as I said, your thinking by asking yourself these 3 questions, and then becoming more flexible about your reality, and then watch your emotion change from anxiety and loss of control to concern and being much more in control of your thought and behavior. And that's what the principle of emotional responsibility is all about. So I'm going to give you a couple of other tips as useful strategies with worries. So if you're feeling anxious, accept that you're feeling anxious, accept that you're feeling that, accept that it's just an emotion that could leave you just as it came, it could leave you. Learn to breathe. I think Rita is giving a talk on breathing, and that will be very useful for you to assist, I think, to attend, because breathing is very important when you're feeling anxious. So I'm sure Rita will show you how, but I can give you a tip as well, to take deep breaths from your nose. And it's very important that you do that from the nose. Fill your lungs with air so that you bring back the oxygen that has left you with your short breathing. When you're anxious, you start taking short breaths, and then exhale from your mouth and have a good long exhale. And what's even better is to hold your breath in for a few seconds before releasing. If you could do that, that's very helpful with anxiety. So we said knowledge that you're having anxiety, go into deep breathing, challenge your thoughts, realize that your brain is playing tricks on you, and use calming visualization. So you could create for yourself a very calming space in your mind, which you would go to and feel calm in, such as being under a waterfall or being in an open space with a really nice calming view. You could also use positive self-talk to encourage you, and focus on meaningful tasks, so tasks at hand. Do what you are supposed to do, what you need to do, and so do what you need to do instead of avoiding. Beat your anxiety by doing the opposite of what it's telling you to do. And there we go. So thank you very much for listening.